Hello everyone, Laura K. Buzz here, and I've got a review code for Days Gone Remastered for the PS5, and I don't have time to do a full in-depth accessibility review video as I would otherwise like to do. We are in the month leading up to the Accessibility Summer Showcase happening in June, and life has gotten pretty chaotic and busy at the second. But I do have code. Thank you very much, PlayStation, for sending this over. And I did want to take some time today to have a look at the new accessibility settings I've been told have been added to the PS5 version of the game. Um, if for no other reason than I do have a video going up today that will be shortly after this, where I talk about my complicated thoughts on PlayStation making accessibility features a paid component of remasters, and my perhaps some complaints with that. But I wanted to make sure that if I was going to talk about that, I balanced it with talking about what Days Gone is doing right in terms of new accessibility additions. So this is a largely unscripted video. We're just going to jump into the game, have a look around at the settings, and see what's here, because I've heard there's some pretty cool stuff.
UI narration on.
So, as has become somewhat of a standard for PlayStation first-party studios releases over the last 5 or so years, we have an initial accessibility setup menu when we first boot up the game, and UI narration is turned on as default. That is wonderful. This is something that has been becoming more common, I would say, in the last, 6 to 12 months. We've seen more and more games doing this. This is important because if you're someone who needs UI narration in order to be able to navigate menus, you need it turned on from the start, otherwise you're going to need sighted assistance to turn it on. So, wonderful. We're going to turn off UI narration. We've got options in this initial menu for speaker setup, dialogue, collectible audio cues, sound notifications to help locate nearby collectible objects more easily. I love that. Let's toggle that on. Dynamic range, wonderful. So this is the what is the difference between the loudest sounds and the quietest sounds? If you put that to full range, the loudest sounds are as loud as possible, the quietest sounds are as quiet as possible. If you put it to night mode, the quietest sounds are a bit louder and the loudest sounds are a bit quieter. This is good for if you are playing at night, not through speakers, and you don't want to accidentally have a spike in volume wake someone up in your house. But it's also really good for me as an autistic player who can get a bit overwhelmed by sudden fluctuations in audio volume. Being able to make the quieter sounds louder so I can more easily pick them out of an audio mix, and making the louder sounds quieter so they're not quite so overwhelming. Wonderful. I love when this gets offered. Gameplay, game speed. Determine the speed of gameplay. So we have 25% increment toggles. We can slow down gameplay. I'm curious if there's an option to perhaps toggle that with a button or with a touchpad swipe. That's the kind of setting I'd love to be able to very quickly change during gameplay rather than having to go a few menu settings deep. We'll check that when we get into the game itself. High contrast mode, hooray! This was not in the original release of the game. We can toggle it on, and this is our sort of default visual. The main character is in light blue. Enemies are in red. Interactables are in yellow, and I assume green is friendly NPCs as our default color scheme. And then high contrast HUD, if we turn that on, okay, it puts black boxes behind UI elements so that they're better contrasted. So for example, that shotgun in light white isn't getting washed out by the grey behind it. But also for 3D elements, like the interaction icon on the back of the car, basically making sure that anything that might get washed out has a more solid background behind it. That's wonderful. Subtitle text. We've got a larger size. Initial impressions, I would like to see a largest size of subtitles. Maybe when we see it in action in the game itself, that size will look better than it does on this small preview. This isn't... I've seen much larger subtitle sizes, and I would always recommend offer... If I was consulting on this game and I was shown this was the largest subtitle size, I'd say to the developer, ideally you'd offer another size above that and then another size above that, ideally. Subtitle color. Okay, so we can change the overall color. Speaker names, we can change the color on. Subtitle background. You can have to different degrees. Darkened, light, black. And that's everything in the defaults menu. So, let's see if we have any other important settings. If we go to options, okay, the first menu we see in the options menu is a dedicated accessibility menu. I love that. I'm gonna assume, and we'll double check this as we go. PlayStation usually does what I really like as a solution, which is settings that are in the dedicated accessibility menu. You can also find those settings in other menus. Like you can probably find some of them in audio. You can find some of them in gameplay. They double up where you can find them, but it means like if you know you need accessibility settings, most things that most people would consider accessibility, there's one consolidated place you'll know to find them. But if you might benefit from those settings but not consider yourself someone who needs accessibility, you can still find them in other menus, which I think is a good approach. Swipe controls on. Good to be able to turn those off. Not making swipe controls mandatory or letting them be turned off is good, because it means that the game can be played with the PlayStation Access controller, which doesn't have a touch swipe panel on it. Track assist. Should icons appear over clues in tracking zones? Yes. Autocomplete QuickTime events is toggle. Recenter camera on attack. Repeated button presses can be changed to a hold. Repeated button size, we can make the icon larger. Ooh, field of view. Increasing this value makes the field of view wider and will render more content on screen, which may impact performance. A wider field of view is great. For me, as someone who gets prone to motion sickness, being able to increase my field of view generally is really helpful for that, being able to put it up to, say, 80 or 90. But I'm really glad that they acknowledge the game is not built around this, and we can't guarantee that your performance will be stable if you do so. Because you know what's another thing that impacts motion sickness for me? Inconsistent frame rates for a game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this on its default, but knowing that I have the option to tweak it and to, during gameplay, work out, is a wider FOV, but potentially slightly less consistent frame rate, is that a trade-off I want to make? That's great. Assistant center screen dot, again, good for motion sickness. UI color mode. High contrast mode is on. We have different presets for high contrast mode. Lovely, okay. There we go. And we can customize individual colors from there, which is good. So if you're someone who's, say, perhaps colorblind and is going to struggle with the defaults for high contrast mode, great. Any other settings in here that weren't in the initial boot? Subtitle background, UI narration, we talked about before. Right, what else are in the other settings? We've got a couple of a couple of sliders for different kinds of audio. Controller speakers? Yeah, I'm happy for that to be audio from the controller speakers. Camera sensitivity, aim sensitivity, motion aiming. You can turn off different kinds of vibration and change the strength of them. Is good. Adaptive triggers, we can turn those off for specific things. Oh, dead zones for the touchpad is one I don't see very often. Should the player snap to the nearest target when aiming? Love that as someone that's got really poor hand-eye coordination. Aim stickiness sensitivity. Yep. XP indicators? Yeah, turn on XP indicators. We have different graphics modes. We have quality or performance. Performance I will always pick just as it limits the risk of motion sickness for me. Depth of field and motion blur can be turned off as well. I'm going to turn those off because, again, they tend to be motion sickness triggers for me. Wonderful. So, yeah, this is a pretty robust set of default accessibility options. This is very much what I've come to expect out of a PlayStation first-party release. The only thing that's not being offered here that it's not quite a standard for PlayStation yet, but it's slowly becoming one, and it's getting offered more and more frequently by PlayStation, and as such, when it's not present, I notice it, is cinematic audio descriptions, which is narration of what is happening in, you know, pre-rendered cutscenes. I'm assuming it's not here because this game doesn't have any sightless player navigation tools. It doesn't have any settings that are designed to help sightless blind players navigate, and as such, maybe they thought there's less necessity to offer cinematic audio descriptions if you're going to need to have a degree of sighted vision to play it. Just a little surprised not to see it, because it's particularly with these paid remasters that come with accessibility. The last, like, 3 of them that PlayStation has done have added cinematic audio descriptions as one of the things in that paid upgrade. So let's jump in to the game itself on its just the default difficulty it's offering us there, and we'll show off a little bit of gameplay, and then I'll probably wrap this video up, because this is not going to be a big, huge deep dive into this game's accessibility. I just wanted to have a quick first impressions look and show people what to expect. Ooh, interesting. High contrast mode does not appear to be active in this cutscene.
Yeah, she's burning up. The knife must have nicked her kidney or something. She's turning septic.
Yeah. Is high contrast mode available during any cutscenes, or is this... Because if you look at something like The Last of Us Part 1 and 2, cutscenes are in high contrast mode because they're rendered in engine. But I know that there are some PlayStation games that don't.
How you doing, little sister?
So stupid. It was this little kid.
I'm wondering if this is a pre-rendered cutscene, perhaps.
Little kid.
Big goddamn knife. Hey, help me.
Because yeah, if high contrast mode doesn't work in cutscenes,
Come through. We gotta get to the roof. Flag down.
that's one of those things I would really love to see highlighted in the settings menu. I would love it if the settings menu had some text, much like the text that's like, oh, if you increase the FOV, it might impact performance. Have something that says high contrast mode, applicable in gameplay, not during cutscenes.
I'm okay. You're gonna be alright.
Yeah, to my previous comment, I do wish that the game would offer, like, this is not a bad size for subtitles, it's not terrible.
Okay, Boozer.
I would
Let's go.
love
We
it
gotta let
if
on
the
that
game
now.
offered
We gotta get
at
on that
least
side.
one size category
There's only
above
room
this
for
for
two
its
on that chopper.
subtitles. Yeah, skipping ahead, hopefully, to some gameplay here. I want to see when this high contrast mode kicks in. Yeah, here we go. Now that we're in gameplay, it's instantly kicked off. So yeah, I want to have a quick look at the options again for high contrast mode. Is there an option to make the world grayscale at all? No. Which is interesting, because the images shown here made me think that the high contrast mode set the world to grayscale. But I realize in hindsight, I was primarily focusing on the grey road. It's a foggy, rainy day. The truck on the left is grey. But if I look at the cars on the right, they are in blue. They're just sort of behind fog. If you're someone who appreciates being able to grayscale the non-high contrast elements, that's not an option here. This is a good bright high contrast implementation. I definitely think that this is a better implementation in terms of being lighting agnostic than something like God of War Ragnarok was. In that, a lot of the time when you moved from your character being in areas of light to darkness, the luminosity of the high contrast characters kind of got desaturated. Here, regardless of the lighting, the character is pretty strongly contrasted, which is great. Again, I would have appreciated a toggle to grayscale the world as well, but it's not quite as necessarily in a game where you have good vibrancy. Like, I should probably talk about why I appreciate the ability to grayscale the world. For me, one of the big reasons that I really appreciate high contrast modes existing is I struggle with sensory overwhelm as an autistic person, and the best way I can explain that is when sensory information, be that audio, be that visual in this case, is coming to me, my brain struggles to filter to do the automatic filtering that non-autistic people are able to do, where your brain goes, this is important, this is what I'm paying attention to, this is unimportant, we can filter it out. All information is like the same level of priority in my brain, and that makes it hard to take in everything and focus on what I'm supposed to be focusing on and not get overwhelmed or distracted. And by being able to grayscale the world, it may not seem like a big deal. It's easier for me to create a mental rule of everything that is grey is unimportant. Whereas here, like, yeah, I can tell the bright things are important, but there are still colours, and there's still things passing me by that I go, maybe that's important, maybe that's close enough to colour that I need to pay attention to it. Grayscaling the world lets me, like, it makes it so much easier for me to tune out the unimportant and to really just focus on the bright colour-coded interactables. So again, a solution like this, certainly helpful. I'm glad it's here. I would prefer it to be here than not. But I always appreciate when this does come alongside that ability to grayscale the world. But yeah, that's a quick look at the accessibility offerings available in Days Gone. I might try and do like a quick Twitch stream of this next week. I'm currently finishing off streaming through 1000X Resist, but I might try and stream some of this on Twitch to give it a little more of a closer look at its accessibility offerings. But I think we'll wrap this up here for now. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. We will have just the one accessibility episode for you next week, I imagine. Probably not 4 like today. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Goodbye.